great to have you on here. It's really exciting to see, again, Alabama and Texas get to meet on the same field once again, but roll tide.
Roll Tide. So happy that Allstate's doing this for us. This is so great. And honestly, it's so weird because I was a Texas fan growing up. That was my team. I'm from Dallas. I don't think there's anybody that's watching this that doesn't know that by now. And then my allegiance flipped at 17 to Alabama. So it's like this weird mesh between like my childhood and now my team, right? It's like this weird dynamic. So seeing Bama, Texas last year was one of the most uncomfortable games ever because I'm just rooting. First of all, it was just really uncomfortable because we didn't play well. Secondly, to see like the team I always pulled for against my team is just weird. So one that we're going to have to get used to, though, now knowing that this game's going to be played quite regularly, and one that is going to be awesome and hopefully set the tone for a great year for the Tide.
Let's go back to that moment again when you made the decision to come to Alabama and you flipped the switch, as you say. Your Texas fandom goes away. Now you're all with the Crimson Tide. What was it when you first got to Tuscaloosa, either on a visit or when you finally arrived for your freshman year? What'd you embrace first thing about Alabama? What made you fall in love pretty quickly?
Well, I fell in love with Alabama before I ever committed. I just didn't have the offer. So it was, I'll commit to Texas Tech, and that's where I was. And I was actually the first Alabama game I ever attended. Well, I was in the stands at the Cotton Bowl in 2006, on January 1st of 2006, and I was wearing Texas Tech gear. I was committed. I was a Red Raider recruit, and was there pulling for the Red Raiders. And then actually later that night, I got the call from Mike Shula and said, "Hey, we're going to offer you. We told you to be patient. You were. The guy that we were recruiting, Tim Tebow, decided to go elsewhere. You are now the next guy that we're going to offer. And if you don't take it, then we're probably not taking a quarterback this year. So just that's how much that's how much we like you. That's how much we care about you. And we want you to come take a visit." I said, "Perfect. I'll be there next weekend." And the rest is history. But it was funny because my mom, when I committed to Texas Tech, actually didn't tell me this, but told my dad this, and I have since heard the story. She was in tears when I committed to Texas Tech, saying that I just really want him to go to Alabama. I really want him to go to Alabama. And my dad was like, you need to stop. You need to snap out. He doesn't have an Alabama offer, so they are not an option at the moment. But that hit home to me because when I committed to Alabama, I didn't even tell my parents. I just said, as Mike Shula and Bob Connolly, who were recruiting me at the time, as they were sitting in my living room, I had just gotten back from my visit Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They came over on a Monday, and I committed to them before I even talked to my parents about it. They had said, "Hey, it's up to you. You do what you feel is best." And I knew immediately. I mean, the second you walk on campus, the second I sat in Buffalo Phil's for the first time, the second people were rabid and talking about the Tide there in January and what was coming for the Tide after a Cotton Bowl win and a 10-win season for the first time in a long time. It just felt like something you just had to be a part of. And I really believe that with our class in 2006, people will look back and look at individual names in that class that either became great players or became great role players. We had a bunch of guys in that recruiting class that either won state championships or played for very proud high school programs, from Hoover to UMS Wright to Homewood to a handful of others to Briarwood, who at the time was excellent. I went to Southlake. We won state. We had a kid from Nice High School in Florida. They won state. And we just had a lot of guys that played at a really, really high level in high school for programs that were going to win. So collectively, we understood what it would take to potentially turn this thing around and do the little things leading up to game day that would allow you to be successful on game day.
Obviously, it culminated in a national championship win for Alabama against Texas your junior season, and we'll talk more about that coming up in next week's episode as we continue promoting the Allstate Crossbar Challenge. Thinking about Texas, and again, such a great close game between these schools last year in Austin. Now they get to meet this season in Tuscaloosa, and I think everybody around here wondering, will Texas bring that same kind of fight? Are they maybe improved from what we saw a year ago down in Austin?
I think they should be improved. But I also think too, last year was a really perfect storm in a sense that it was early in the season. There were some young players that were filling in. You know, the best players on the team, whether it be Bryce and Will, didn't have great days. Will in particular, very uncharacteristically average day from him. And I think that had a little bit of a shell-shocked feeling that kind of would reverberate through the rest of the locker room where, man, if Will's not getting it done, then man, how am I going to get it done? You know, I think that had a little bit of an unusual effect. He just didn't have his best stuff. And look, his standard's really high, you know, so it's pretty easy to tell when he's maybe not at his best. But looking back to the actual game itself, there were a lot of missed opportunities. There were moments in which, you know, we could have done something maybe a little bit better in protection, or maybe done something a little bit better with a route out of the backfield. It just wasn't quite the well-oiled machine that we're used to. And I think that will get everyone's attention this offseason to make sure the urgency is there in fall camp. And the urgency has been there throughout the scrimmage situations. And the urgency is there in the days leading up to the first game, even though it's against the program that hopefully it's not crazy competitive. There still needs to be urgency there because you are going to make sure that those practice habits are applied the rest of the way. So going to be really interesting, I think, to watch it. But Texas, they have excellent wide receivers. I think it's one of the best matchups probably in America this year is the Alabama defensive backs against the Texas wide receivers. Because I think, look, I'm just going to say I never say it. But in this world, in this forum, I'm going to. I have
You're
my
wearing a Bama shirt
on
right now.
I have my Bama shirt on, so I might as well at least embrace the place. I think we have an excellent secondary. Watching them in practice, the coverage has been really tight. It's been tough for the quarterbacks to find a lot of room, and the corners are long. I think Key, the addition from UAB, is an excellent box player as a safety that knows how to play the run and is physical. I think Caleb Downs is phenomenal. I think Devontae Smith's had a really good camp. So there's a lot to really like about the versatility in the back end. Then you have the Malachi Moores who's playing inside and doing some really nice things too. So I think the depth in the secondary is excellent. Well, the wide receiver depth at Texas is also excellent. A.D. Mitchell's a transfer from Georgia. He's a guy that I think most Bama fans remember. You know, he caught a touchdown in the national championship game in 21. Xavier Worthy, great speed, unbelievable speed, top end. But Jordan Whittington's a very solid possession receiver who makes a lot of plays on third down. And then Isaiah Nair is a transfer from Wyoming who hurt his knee in preseason camp last year. And we haven't seen a lot of him, but he's drawn rave reviews for those that have seen him. And they have a tight end who is also very, very capable contributing in the passing game, in LT Overton, who's really, really talented. He's a little bit, I'm trying to think of a guy that he would be comparable to at Alabama. I don't think it's fair to compare him to OJ Howard because I think OJ Howard was just such a freak, right? But he's in that mold, maybe not quite as long, maybe not quite as big, maybe not quite as fast, but he's in that mold of being a real difference maker if he can find a favorable matchup against a linebacker or safety. So I think that's a fascinating matchup. And I think the other thing too is Texas, their defensive line, coached by Bo Davis, a guy that all of us are very familiar with. He was the D-line coach when I was in school. I love Bo Davis. Like, I think he's a phenomenal coach and knows how to press the right motivational buttons to get his guys playing at a really high level. I think we all look at the Alabama offensive line. We say that's the strength of the team. Probably the best group collectively on the entire roster. They know it. They embrace it. A lot's going to be put on their shoulders, and I think they'll answer the challenge. I think that Texas defensive line is a very proud group that has improved, and they're going to basically try to completely sell out against the run and dare whoever the quarterback is to pass. And you got to beat them through the air. So I think a big part of it is that's great. You can sell it against the run against this offensive line, but is it going to matter? Are they still going to get their yardage? Because there were plenty of groups that sold out against the run in 2015 or in 2011 or in 2009, and it didn't matter. Guess what? Because those guys are going to move you off the point, whether you liked it or not. So I think that is the other matchup that I'm just so excited to see, is that great Alabama offensive line that's really returning to form against the defensive line that by all accounts has improved drastically.
Again, we're just over a week away from the All-Star Crossbar Challenge between Alabama and Texas here in Tuscaloosa. But Greg, there is one game right before that for Alabama, obviously at home this week against Middle Tennessee. We've talked about the defense, and we'll let you go on this. How about for this Crimson Tide offense? What do you want to see on Saturday here in Tuscaloosa?
Efficiency. And keep in mind too, and look, Middle Tennessee's got some firepower. Like they can score. But we said the same thing about Utah State last year in week 1. It's like, hey man, I'm not saying it's going to be, but just be cognizant and respect the opponent, because this is a team that beat Miami last year and in the process had like 5 60-yard plays in the game. I mean, they got some juice. So they have some dudes that can take the top off. So you need to be real mindful of that. But as far as the Alabama offense is concerned, what I want to see more than anything else is, let's start with the offensive line. We've already kind of hit that. When I went to practice, it was like, after every play, JC Latham was like screaming at the top of his lungs with energy and excitement and enthusiasm with how they were able to move a defensive player off the ball. I mean, and Tyler Booker next to him and Seth McLaughlin in the middle. And whether it's, Ferg or Dalcourt there at left guard. And then obviously with what Caden's doing at left tackle and the other competition that's emerging and the depth that's emerging, this is a group that understands that the success of the offense will run through them. And I think they are owning that. It's a veteran group. It's a talented group. I think you have probably a handful of first-round picks among the bunch. And I think they're taking real ownership of the entire offense, knowing that there are some pieces that are some unknowns. I think the running back room's really, really deep. I think everybody knows Roydell and Jace, but I think everybody needs to know about Jam Miller. I have yet to hear a single negative thing about any of the backs. I mean, everyone is just thrilled with what the backs are doing right now. But Jam Miller's the guy that needs to be, I think he will be a household name by the end of the year. But I'm just curious whether it's going to be week 1 or week 2 or week 7 or whatever week that ends up being. The wide receivers, you can see I'm avoiding every position but quarterback, but we'll finish there. The wide receivers, when I went to practice, I think they're going against a really good secondary. And I think that it's easy to get discouraged at times with being a little bit less efficient in practice and or in scrimmages, because you're going against maybe one of the best secondaries in the country. I mean, are they number 1? Are they number 5? Are they number 10? Who cares? But they're one of the best, without question, in the back end. Even though there's some youth, that's one of the best groups I've seen collectively all season long. So I think it's easy to maybe get down on yourself a little bit, to have some drops, to have lapses in concentration in camp, because 1, it's 1,000,000,000 degrees, and 2, you're going against a really solid group. So I want to see them play confident. I don't want to see drops, because drops are a concentration issue. And it's one thing to have drops when you're on practice 17 out of 24 and you're like, man, I'm over camp. Like, we've all been there, by the way. Like, all of us at some point are throwing in the towel in camp because, like, man, this is just the same thing every day. I'm just exhausted. I'm over this. Like, let's play a game. So concentration is not always at a premium in fall camp. So I want to see concentration. I want to see separation. I want to see great run after catch, because I do think that's going to be a lot of what the offense might be early on. And then I think if they can hit a couple deep shots over the top, that'd be great. I also want to see Amari Niblack. I've heard a ton of good things about him and being able to create matchups. So I really want to see what he can do. I love CJ Dupree. Nobody's talking about him. That dude's a heck of a player. We called a game of his at Maryland last year. The first play of the game against Ohio State, he took like a little screen, 25 yards, like hurdling guys. I'm like, this guy's a monster. So I really like him. And I think Robbie Oots is better in the passing game than people realize. I don't think he's ever going to be a guy that's going to lead the team in receptions like Brock Bowers, but I do think he's a guy that could keep you honest, especially off heavy play action, and might be a valuable asset in the red zone off heavy play action. So that's pretty much the entire offensive roster. Let's go now to the quarterback situation. I think Jalen, at this point, naturally, I mean, he's been there the longest. He deserves the first crack at it. I think that's perfectly within reason. I don't know if that was the intent coming into spring or summer. I think they just kind of went into it, say, hey, we're going to roll him out all the time. But pretty sure Jalen got the first reps in the spring, got the first reps in the fall, and nobody did enough, relatively speaking, to take that first opportunity from him. And that's not a knock on the other two guys. I just think McElroy has done pretty much what he needs to do to secure the first opportunity to be the guy. But I would be surprised if the opportunity presents itself. Now, you never want to go into a game saying it's going to get sideways. We're going to get our backups in. We're going to get this guy this many reps. We want to play the freshman. No, you never want to go into a game like that. Like, let the game and the outcome of the game dictate based on your performance. But if for whatever reason Jalen doesn't play well in the first couple series, or if, maybe they're a little stagnant offensively, I wouldn't be surprised to see another one of the two guys in, whether it's Ty Simpson or Buckner, talking to the staff and talking to people that are familiar. They're really pleased with their quarterback situation. I mean, I think a lot of people are going to look at it and say, well, it's a concern. It's a concern. Well, I view it, and I've used this analogy already this offseason. When you put so much on the quarterback position, a la Bryce Young in 2021 and 2022, the rest of the muscles, if that is the bicep, if you will, if your quarterback is your bicep and all you do are curls, the rest of your muscles are going to atrophy and you're not going to be as strong collectively. Your bicep might be great, but your legs are going to be like twigs and your triceps will be flabby. And collectively as a team, you're not going to be great. So I think that there's more of a collective ownership among the offensive players to know, hey man, we got to upgrade our level of play because that guy at quarterback isn't there to bail us out. So I think McElroy needs to be real smart when it comes to ball security. We all understand that that was not necessarily one of his strengths last year. Let's see if he's improved in that regard. How is he as far as the intermediate and the underneath accuracy? I think he's a pretty good deep ball thrower. But I think in this style of offense, you got to hit some things underneath to kind of soften them up a little bit and to spread them out a little bit. And then at the same time, be smart when escaping the pocket. Don't always run outside the pocket, run up in the pocket. I think that's really big because when he gets going north and south, he's a handful. For Ty, play confident, man. Like that's my biggest advice to Ty. I think he's got tons of talent. I think he's got tons of ability. And I think he sometimes gets down on himself. I mean, you can almost see it. It makes a bad play, makes a bad read. It almost gets kind of down on himself, but he's a young player. I mean, I kind of went through that myself when I was a young player as well. Like it's too hard on myself. And sometimes that impacted my performance on the field. So when you get out there, understand that with all due respect to Middle Tennessee, and with all due respect to just about all the teams you'll play this year, with the exception of maybe one or two here or there, the team that you're playing in practice is often better than the team that you're probably going to play on Thursday or on Saturday. So be confident, like distribute. And I remember I didn't really get confident until I played against Western Carolina because I was like, oh my gosh, hang on, this is not, there's Nikita Stover. I'll throw that here. Oh, there's Nick Walker. I'll throw that. It was just like, it was so much easier because we had practiced for it and we had prepared for it. And I knew the reads, I knew the progressions, I knew how the defense was going to align, all those other things. So I think once you play, you just get more confident and then you're just build on it from there. And then for Buckner, just continue to endear yourself to the teammates. It's a difficult spot to be thrust into. You get here late. Other guys have already established a relationship. Continue to create and cultivate those relationships and then just be efficient. I think he was probably a little anxious early in camp, felt like he needed to overcome and create this as if there was this big gap between the first two and him. I think he pressed a little early on, and now he's kind of settling in and has played better, I think, in the latter part of camp, which is encouraging. And then for the freshmen, whether it's Holstein or Lonergan, just keep grinding, man, and take every rep, whether it's scout team or if it's out there on the field with the ones or the twos or the threes, every single rep matters. Because I think as a freshman, it's easy to be like, oh, well, this play might matter more than this play. No, they all matter. Whether it's 1st and 10, you're handing off and you're carrying out your fake on a bootleg, or if it's heavy play action, you're throwing a deep ball against Auburn in the Iron Bowl. I mean, they all matter. So I think that's probably the next step in the progression, but they've been real pleased with the freshmen as well. I know that was like a 30-minute answer. Is that,
you might need to tighten up before your first game broadcast, but you're doing great. Now we like this
radio. We're in radio podcast mode right now. Right. And it's my team. So like, I probably know a little too much. Like when I'm calling a game and as you can see behind me, I'm calling South Carolina this weekend against North Carolina. I won't be able to wax poetic for, 30 minutes on the guards. But when it's my team, I feel pretty confident in being able to have those discussions.
We're glad you did. Well, that's why you're one of the best in the business. Craig McElroy, former Crimson Tide quarterback. Thank you so much for your time here with us this week on Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. Look forward to being joined by you again coming up next week, as we will finally be at game week for the Allstate Crossbar Challenge between Alabama and Texas. But have a great call this weekend. Thank you for your time. Roll Tide.
Thanks, Rod. Roll Tide, brother.